The ocean is calm. Too calm. Inside a narrow steel cylinder, barely large enough to sit upright, a young officer of the Imperial Japanese Navy waits. There is no window, no escape hatch, no plan for survival. In front of him are only the essentials: a compass, a depth gauge, a throttle. The steel walls are cold. The air is heavy. When this torpedo is released, he knows his life will end with the impact. This is not a kamikaze pilot high above the clouds. There is no sky, no horizon, only darkness, only water. This is a Kaiten. By the final years of World War II, Japan faced a reality it could no longer escape. Control of the sea was gone. American aircraft carriers dominated the Pacific. Radar eliminated surprise. Anti-submarine warfare turned the ocean itself into a trap. The United States was producing ships, aircraft, and weapons faster than Japan could replace its losses. The Imperial Japanese Navy had been built for decisive battles. Now, it was fighting a war of attrition it could not win. As options disappeared, the solutions grew more extreme. If technology and industry could not close the gap, then sacrifice would have to. What many people don't realize is that kamikaze aircraft were only one part of a much broader strategy. As Japan's situation worsened, entire suicide units were created across multiple domains. There were the Oka, piloted rocket bombs launched from aircraft; the Shinyo, explosive motorboats designed to ram enemy ships; the Fukuryu, combat divers meant to wait underwater with explosive charges, human naval mines; and beneath the surface of the ocean, the most feared of them all, the Kaiten. Among all these weapons, the kamikazes were the most effective. By the end of the war, they were credited with sinking approximately 47 American ships, killing around 4,900 sailors, and wounding nearly 5,000 more. In the brutal arithmetic of war, this appeared, to Japanese planners, to prove that sacrifice could still have impact. And that belief shaped what came next. In 1944, the Kaiten program was approved. The idea was simple and desperate. Japan already possessed one of the most powerful torpedoes in the world, the Type 93 Long Lance. Engineers modified it, adding a small cockpit behind the warhead. A human pilot would guide the weapon manually during the final approach, correcting course and depth to increase the chance of impact. On paper, it promised precision. In reality, it promised only one certainty. Once launched, there was no return. The name Kaiten is often translated as Return to Heaven or Heaven Shaker, a symbolic name for a desperate attempt to rebalance naval power as the tide of war shifted further toward the Allies. Kaiten pilots were young naval officers, usually between 17 and 28 years old. They were trained, educated, technically capable. Some volunteered out of conviction, others out of duty. Some because refusal was not truly an option. Before missions, they wrote farewell letters, left behind personal belongings, and participated in quiet ceremonies. They did not speak of victory. They spoke of family, of honor, and of fear they were never meant to show. Pilots were trained at isolated naval facilities, most notably on Otsujima Island. They learned navigation, control, and how to operate under extreme conditions. But no amount of training could prepare them for the waiting. Not every pilot died immediately. Some waited weeks, others waited months. Missions were canceled, submarines reassigned, weather delayed deployments. Each delay meant waking up another day, knowing your role had already been decided. Pilots ate with submarine crews, who would launch them, and then sail home without them. Everyone understood the unspoken truth. One group would return, the other would not. Inside a Kaiten, conditions were brutal. The space allowed almost no movement. Heat built rapidly. Ventilation was poor. Oxygen levels could drop dangerously low. The pilot controlled only the essentials: direction, depth, and speed. There was no direct visual confirmation of the target. Navigation depended on instinct, timing, and luck. Some pilots lost consciousness before reaching enemy ships. Others missed by only meters. Inside the Kaiten, there was no second attempt. One of the Kaiten's greatest limitations was its range. On their own, they could not reach distant enemy formations. To be used at all, they had to be carried by submarines and launched close to their targets. This decision came at a terrible cost. Mounted externally, Kaitens made submarines slower, less maneuverable, and easier to detect. Many submarines were damaged or destroyed before they could launch a single weapon. According to post-war estimates, Kaiten attacks caused around 200 enemy casualties. But to deliver those weapons, the cost was far higher. Roughly 800 Japanese sailors lost their lives simply trying to bring the Kaitens close enough to be used. Pilots, submarine crews, men who never even reached the moment they were prepared to die for. One Kaiten pilot wrote before his final mission, "I must not forget that I am, above all, Japanese. May my country prosper forever." There is no triumph in these words, no hatred, only a man trying to leave something behind that might outlive him.
After Japan's surrender, the Kaiten program was examined in hindsight. Naval officers acknowledged its failure. It did not change the course of the war. It consumed trained personnel and valuable submarines at a moment Japan could least afford the loss. Families received letters, or nothing at all. Today, Kaiten sit in museums, preserved steel shells, silent. The Kaiten pilots were not heroes in the traditional sense, and they were not villains. They were young men pushed to the absolute edge of war. When nations run out of choices, human lives become currency. The ocean closed over them. The war moved on. But their story remains, not as glory, but as a warning.
That's the end of this video. Would you like to see more of it? I hope so. Let me know in the comments.